for the delay. We finished floor a little bit late, but now we are ready to go. The Minnesota Senate Labor Committee is called to order. I'll note that we do have a quorum, and we're ready to begin with our agenda for today. First up, we have an overview and confirmation of the members of the Board of Electricity. And we have Trevor Turek here. If you please come on up. Chair of the Board of Electricity, welcome to the Senate Labor Committee.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. So Trevor Turek, Chair of the State Board. I was asked to come today and give you a little bit of a background of what the State Board does and what we provide to the industry. I was going to give you just a short background to myself. I'm the training director of the Minneapolis JATC. We're an electrical apprenticeship program. What the JATC is it's jointly regulated or jointly controlled by both the IBW, the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, and also NECA, the National Electrical Contractors Association, which gives, two perspectives to the industry. So prior to that, I've seen a lot of different aspects of the electrical industry. Started off like many other electricians, went through a 2-year trade school, completed a IBW-sponsored apprenticeship program. I spent about 10 years in the field doing actual electrical work. Sometimes people ask me if I actually have ever done electrical work, and I assure you that I have. And then I spent about 5 years in the classroom in apprenticeship training, and now I help oversee an apprenticeship program. So kind of my background, very much grateful for the opportunity to serve on the state board. Other areas of the industry that I try to stay active is I serve on 4 different UL technical advisory committees where we deal with product standards, development, and that sort of thing. So, got it figured out. So to give you kind of a brief overview of the board, as I'm sure all of you know, the board is established under 326B32. It has 12 members, which we'll get to in a little bit, and the breakdown and the different aspects of the industry that they come through, which I think gives us, a lot of different opinions or outlooks. So why does the board really exist? The primary focus of the board is public safety. At the end of the day, we are in an industry where if we don't do our job correctly, electrocutions can happen, buildings can burn down, none of which we certainly ever want. One of the codes that we follow is the National Electrical Code. The sole focus or the beginning of that code would say that its focus is to protect persons and property with the hazards that arise from the use of electricity. Another reason the board exists is it does ensure consistent standards throughout the state of Minnesota. We would want an electrical installation in Mankato to look as the same as in Minneapolis, as the same as in St. Michael. And then it also provides accountability, whether that's to contractors, electricians, and so on and so forth. So as far as the board makeup goes, it's made up of 12 members, like I suggested. 1 member is going to be an electrical inspector. There's 2 contractor members on the state board. There is 2 journey worker members. There'll be 2 electric utility providers. You'll have 1 certified engineer on the board, and then 2 technicians or a contractor from the limited energy side of the industry. And then to round out the board, you would have a public member, and then you'd also have the commissioner designee. So core, if you want to know what we do, really the core duties are, number 1 would be to adopt an electric code, right, or to adopt the National Electrical Code. That is something that has to get looked at really every 3 years because it is on a 3-year cycle. Another thing that we work through is establishing licensing rules. So as this industry changes and new technologies come about, there may be modifications that are needed. One we worked on a couple of years ago was with Class 4 entering into the electrical world. The state didn't have any licensing requirements, so that was one of the things that we had to work through. And then lastly, helping to set continuing education requirements. So all of the licenses need, as technologies change, there needs to be some requirements to make sure current license holders are staying up on technologies. So take you through the adoption process a little bit, which I had stated is one of our main focuses. Really, and part of that overall process is one of the things that we want to do is ensure that we're aligning nationally with all of the other electrical installations out there, and is there things that we need to do to adapt to or any changes that need to be made. We're actually currently in the process of recommending the adoption of the 2026 NEC, and hope to have that done coming this July. So some of our oversight rules are working closely with the department as far as advising the commissioner on licensing requirements or inspection requirements and all those sorts of things. As we do come across complaints, those would be passed on as well. I think it's also important to highlight some of the things that the board does not do, right? The board does not directly perform electrical inspections. That's for the department to do. We don't enforce code directly. Again, that would be for the department to do. And then, of course, we would work within the statute. So a little bit about how the board operates. We do elect leadership. So annually, we would elect a chair, a vice chair, and a secretary. And then any votes or any of our business has to include that majority quorum. Any questions for me? That was kind of a lot quickly.
Thank you very much for that great presentation. Members, do we have any questions or comments or discussion? Okay. Well, thank you. This is really informative. It was really nice to have that overview. Members, you should have in your folders a couple of packets, and one of the packets is certificates of appointment. It's a packet of them, and additionally information about the people who I would like to have us move to appoint today and refer that recommendation to the Senate. So if would people like a moment to be able to look through those packets before we make that motion, or are people comfortable moving forward now?
Madam Chair?
Yes.
We don't
Senator
have a
Pappas.
candidate here.
Oh, I'm sorry. I have here.
Is it Keith Covard we're looking at?
Yes, so maybe what I'll do is I'll read out the names that we have. They are in the packets. So the motion, if we're ready to make it, Senator Pappas, would be that we would move to recommend to the Senate the appointment of Keith Colvard, Sarah Gudmundson, Steve Hybe, Jeff Heimrill, Travis Thull, and Desiree Weigel. We would move that they all be confirmed.
Yeah, Madam Chair, my question was, are any of them here? Because usually they come and they say a few words.
Thank you, Senator Pappas.
Don't want that, or they're not here, or?
Just one moment, Senator. Yeah. Thank you, Senator Pappas. And I know that in some other instances, we have had members of boards come and speak personally. But as I understand it, in the Labor Committee, the practice has been to have a representative of the group come and talk about the work of the board. And then we have proceeded in the past that way.
Right, that's fine.
If we're comfortable doing that. Okay. All right. With that, then, I would like to have a motion. Senator Marty moves to recommend to the Senate that the appointment of Keith Colvard, Sarah Gudmundson, Steve Hybe, Jeff Heimrill, Travis Thull, and Desiree Weigel be confirmed. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, the motion carries. Thank you very much. Next up on our agenda today is an overview and another confirmation of the members, this time of the State Board of High Pressure Piping Systems. And today, representing that board and the appointees is Mark Worms, Chair of the Board of High Pressure Piping Systems. Welcome to the Senate Labor Committee.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for everybody's time this morning as well. I wasn't as fancy as Trevor here today, but I maybe a little old-fashioned, and I wrote something down. But I was asked, as the chair of the High Pressure Piping Board, to give a brief overview of what we do and what it pertains to. On the Minnesota High Pressure Piping Board, we oversee three critical facets of mechanical piping systems that are key not only to our state's critical infrastructure, but to the nation's, that require highly qualified staff and contractors to carry out the installations. The three primary focuses of the piping systems are bioprocessing, steam and other heating media, and ammonia refrigeration systems. Minnesota state law has strict standards to qualify businesses and individuals who design and build these systems. We hold the industry to high standards to ensure our key industrial manufacturers are installing their systems with the proper engineering and qualified staff, which inevitably ensures them to operate in a safe manner. We focus on key national standards that are adopted to be the foundation of how we govern our installations. Our board is composed of inspectors, engineers, pipe fitters, contractors, one public member, and often people from utility companies. Together with our diverse backgrounds, we make rulings with everyone's vast knowledge of the industry as a whole. That's it. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Members, does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, thank you very much. Really appreciate the overview. Members, this is going to be the same procedure. You have a nice packet in your folders. And I will read off the names of the people that I would like for us today to move to recommend to the Senate. The people that be appointed to the Board of High Pressure Piping Systems. And those individuals are Sam Christensen, Patrick McCullough, Roger Thien, I believe it's Thien, Mark Worms, Matthew Marquis, Joseph Abbott, Aubrey Archer, Edgar Castro, Eric Hansen, Robert Lind, Jacob Pettit, and Dennis Tyson. So that is the list of names. Our Are members comfortable moving forward in the same fashion that we had previously moved forward? Okay. Thank you, Senator Marty. All right, Senator Marty moves to recommend to the Senate that the appointment of Sam Christensen, Patrick McCullough, Roger Thane, Mark Worms, Matthew Marquis, Joseph Abbott, Aubrey Archer, Edgar Castro, Eric Hansen, Robert Lind, Jacob Pettit, and Dennis Tyson be confirmed. All in favor, please say aye. 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 Any opposed? All right, the motion passes. Thank you all very much today for these presentations, and we're very pleased to recommend the appointments of all of the members to the Senate. Thank you. All right, next up on our agenda today, we have some testimony that is going to be offered in regard to 3 bills that are on our agenda, and those bills are Senate File 4576, Senate File 4686, and Senate File 4689. Do we want to go ahead and just start testimony on those, even though we don't have Maye Quade? Okay. Yeah. Okay, and the bill author is on all 3 of those bills is Senator Maye Quade, but we're going to go ahead and just begin with the presentation of the testimony that people have brought today for any of those 3 bills. And first up, I have Aaron Rosenthal, Research Director of North Star Policy Action. Welcome again to the Senate Labor Committee. If you would please introduce yourself and then proceed with your testimony.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chair McEwen, Senators. For the record, I'm Aaron Rosenthal. I'm the Research Director for North Star Policy Action. We're a think tank dedicated to improving the lives of working Minnesotans. I'm here in support of Senate Files 4576, 4686, and 4689. Some of you may remember I was here last month presenting findings from a report I co-authored with Dr. Manjeet Rege of the risk of AI to Minnesota's workforce. I'm not going to repeat that full presentation today, but I do want to just briefly reiterate 5 key points that I think are pertinent to the legislation today. First, AI capacity and adoption are accelerating rapidly. Today, 8 in 10 companies use AI. That increased adoption reflects increased capability, and AI is only going to get better. Capacity for AI is currently doubling roughly every 7 months. That means if we wait until just next legislative session to take action on this issue, these systems will be 4 times better than they are today. Second, workers are increasingly anxious and they're asking for government's help. Surveys show that Americans' top concern with AI is not misinformation or even privacy, it's the workplace. A simple rule: if 80% of people are telling government to regulate something, you should do it. Third, Minnesota's workforce is particularly vulnerable. Our analysis found that 1 in 3 Minnesota workers is in a job with high AI exposure. That is the highest share in the Midwest. But even that number understates the issue. When it comes to AI being used in hiring decisions or workplace surveillance, every Minnesota worker is at risk. Fourth, Minnesota has largely stood still while other states have acted. States across the political spectrum, Republican and Democrat, are already putting guardrails in place around AI in the workplace. We as a state are falling behind. And fifth, in remedying our inaction, Minnesota should focus on areas of greatest concern for workers, what I called in my previous presentation the 3 Ds of AI risk in the workplace: displacement, digital surveillance, and decision-making. On displacement, we're already seeing early signs of job loss, and it's likely to get worse. The CEO of Anthropic, the AI company behind Claude, is predicting that half of all entry-level white-collar jobs will be eliminated within the next 1 to 5 years. While we don't know exactly how fast this is going to happen, we know enough to prepare. Workers facing job loss will need time, support, and real pathways to retrain. On digital surveillance, the solution is simple. Employers should not be collecting data that is unrelated to the job, and workers should know what data is being collected about them with the ability to access and correct it. No one should be managed by an invisible system they don't understand or even realize is operating. And on decision-making in the workplace, there must be transparency around the use of AI, and AI should never be the primary decision maker in important employment outcomes such as hiring and firing. Lacking this protection, we risk creating a workplace where decisions are made by a black box with no accountability. While all three of these areas are addressed in today's bills, I would also encourage this committee to continue thinking about one other issue: boosting worker voice. AI innovation and worker welfare do not inherently conflict, but aligning them requires that workers, who are the experts in their jobs, have a say in how the technologies are used. Listening to workers will lead us away from a path we've followed too many times in past periods of technological disruption, one of wealth concentration and worker exploitation. That is where we're headed. This time, let's embrace a future of worker satisfaction, increased productivity, and economic flourishing. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And I see we have the bill's author who has joined us. Welcome, Senator Maye Quade, to the Senate Labor Committee. Senator, we began going ahead and hearing our first testifier on all of the testifiers today wanted to testify on all three of these bills, so we want to kind of combine that together. But I wonder if you would, since you're here, I think it might be helpful for members of the committee just to have your introduction to each of the three bills, just so we have sort of a level setting about an understanding of what you're trying to do with the three bills, and then we can go back to the testimony, and then after that we'll take up each bill one at a time and have discussion on it. Would that be agreeable to you?
That sounds great, Madam Chair.
Okay, to your bills then.
Okay.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair and members. I will preface the introductions to all the bills by just saying I don't hate AI. In fact, I think if it's done right, it has tremendous promise, and it could be used to accomplish great things, and I think we're on our way to accomplishing some great things. However, consumer-facing AI with no consumer or worker protections really is a five-alarm fire for our society, and it has potentially devastating consequences, especially when it comes to our employment conditions. So Senate File 4689 and 4686 in particular help set standards that allows companies to deploy innovative technology like automated decision systems or electronic monitoring, while also protecting our employees from discrimination, surveillance, and essentially keeping a human at the helm of our workforce. Let's start with 4689. Senate File 4689 puts common sense, appropriate, and much needed safeguards on automated decision systems being deployed in the workplace. Automated decision systems, or ADSs, are AI tools, essentially machine learning algorithms and data analytics that can assist or increasingly replace humans when making decisions about hiring, performance evaluation, promotions, layoffs, job assignments, discipline, or termination. When automated decision systems are useful, while they can be useful in theory, as with all AI, there's a tremendous risk of bias, threat of surveillance, and the threat of hallucinations, which is why common sense safeguards outlined in this bill are so important. Senate File 4689 would require companies to disclose to workers before deploying an automated decision system. It would prohibit employers from using automated decision systems to obtain or infer private information, including health or reproductive history, disability, religious or political beliefs, immigration status or veteran status, and prevents employers from using automated decision system alone in employment decisions. This bill also creates due process for workers to access information being input into the automated decision system and to know how that was used by the system to make decisions, as well as the right to appeal and have a human review the decision. Moving over to Senate File 4686, this would put basic guardrails in place to protect employees from unnecessary and harmful surveillance. The definitions in Senate File 4686 around artificial intelligence, automated decision system, electronic monitoring tool, employment-related decision, and so forth are essentially, they're the same actually as 4689. And this bill would allow employers to use electronic monitoring tools to ensure compliance with laws and regulations, protect the health, safety, and security of the workplace, but it also makes clear that employers are not allowed to surveil their employees for the purpose of preventing their employees from following the law, to obtain private information, we talked about before, health status, disability status, religious or political beliefs, or make predictions about employees' beliefs, intentions, personality, or emotional state. It prohibits them from taking action against the worker for exercising their legal rights. It doesn't allow them to monitor employees in what I call universally recognized private areas like bathrooms or locker rooms, pumping or nursing rooms, and religious areas. And most importantly, it prohibits employers from monitoring their employees outside of their workplace or from doing their work duties. This bill, like the one before it, requires pre- and post-deployment notification for employees and the right for employees to access their own data, as well as appeal to a human any decisions that are made from the collected data. And last, there's a really important piece to the electronic monitoring bill, Senate File 4686, that says that data privacy and security is something we still care about, and it prevents data from being sold or transferred to a third party unrelated to the analyzing and interpreting of the worker data for safety or security. And then last, we have Senate File 4576, and this regulates employer requirements for when an employee is displaced by AI. The bill requires a 90-day notice if employment affects 10 or more employees or 10% of the employer's workforce, whichever is less. And it requires the Department of Labor and Industry to develop templates for these notices. It entitles employees to transitional employment periods, clarifies that the Commissioner or Attorney General can enforce this law, and requires an annual report to the legislature to be submitted on the number of covered employees that met the displacement notice threshold and summary data on the workers and worker classifications affected. And so I'll end with this, members. Again, I do think AI has tremendous promise. I think it can be used for great things, and we want to be sure that technology can be used by our employers. This just puts in some really common sense, practical safeguards for our employees so we know that the field we're operating in is relatively stable and what we would expect from our employers.
Thank you very much, Senator Maye Quade. We'll go ahead then and proceed with our testifiers, and then we'll turn to address each of the bills in turn. Next, we have Nico Montag. Welcome to the Senate Labor Committee. You can sit wherever you'd like up there, and if you would introduce yourself for the record, and then proceed with your testimony.
Good afternoon, Chair McEwen and members of the committee. My name is Nico Montag, and I work at the Minnesota Department of Revenue. I also serve as a chief steward for AFSCME Local 2829. I am here to voice AFSCME's support for Senate Files 4576, 4686, and 4689, and I'd like to spend some time telling you about what AI implementation looks like at my job. I'd also like to thank Senator Maye Quade for authorizing this legislation. The Department of Revenue adopted the use of AI software, Amazon Connect, in September of 2025. If a taxpayer calls MDOR today, they will complete a call not knowing that the conversation was summarized and transcribed by AI. Any worker data that is generated from this call is also captured by Amazon Connect, which includes the full audio recording of the conversation and a full video recording from the worker. The transcripts and all other data of these calls is retained for at least 6 months. We are also subject to monitoring of all of our keystrokes, what's on our monitors, the quality, brevity, and accuracy of all of our conversations with the members of the public, and our timeliness on completing clerical work when a call ends. We even have to change our online status if we get up to go to the bathroom. Needless to say, we are a very heavily monitored group of workers. MDOR's quality assurance team measures the quality of all of our work by randomly selecting calls that they can replay and score us on a variety of criteria. Some of these metrics are very clear, like checking to see if we said our names and that the caller reached the Department of Revenue. Others are a bit more nebulous, but at least we know that a human is the one evaluating us, and that frankly, not every one of our interactions is going to be scrutinized. We might be constantly surveilled, but at least we are being watched by human eyes. But the AI tools that the state has implemented don't just have a sample of a call here or there. It's capable of analyzing every call, and even our private moments, and compiling these results for our supervisors to review. Amazon Connect can evaluate our vocal intonations and even be used to evaluate expressions. Amazon Connect's materials were told to us upon its first release that they potentially could be used to evaluate the customer interactions and make sure that they could be evaluated for potential positive, medium, or negative interactions. So it is our understanding that the state will likely expand this AI software across the enterprise. And I think that before this system expands any further, workers deserve to know whether or not we will be evaluated and potentially disciplined with AI tools. So please support Senate Files 4686 and 4689. Of course, it's also critical to note that these AI tools aren't only a way for an employer to surveil its workers. Job replacement due to AI is a massive concern for our members, particularly those in call centers and customer service. Companies all over the world have replaced workers like me with AI without an opportunity to change roles within the organization. And we aren't just a line on a budget. We're people with families and mortgages and health problems, and we need employers to consider its workers more as they look at AI tools like what is implemented in Amazon Connect. If AI is going to be as devastating to certain jobs that proponents expect or perhaps even hope for, then notice and retaining or retraining should be the bare minimum that employers offer affected workers. So please support Senate File 4576. Thanks again to the committee for hearing my testimony and to Senator Maye Quade for these bills, and I'm happy to take questions.
Thank you very much for your testimony. Are you able to stick around for the remainder of the hearing? Great, thank you very much. We'll proceed to our next testifier, but if anyone has any questions when we have our discussion, they can ask you. Thank you. And next we have Lauren Schotthorst. Welcome back to the Senate Labor Committee.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair and members of the Senate Labor Committee. My name is Lauren Schotthorst with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. We appreciate the challenges around designing a regulatory framework for a seemingly ubiquitous yet novel technology we all lovingly refer to as AI. As we've begun reviewing the trio of bills before you, seeking to regulate the use of automated decision systems and electronic monitoring tools in particular, we want to flag with some top-line thoughts a few areas where overly broad or inconsistent definitions may inaccurately or unintentionally capture practices or tools in ways that could create existential challenges for business and negatively impact employees, customers, and citizens. We welcome the opportunity to thoughtfully work with you to ensure bills are structured correctly to achieve stated goals while limiting the negative consequences due to a full lack of understanding of what is and is not exactly AI, an automated decision system, or electronic monitoring tool. To that first question, what is AI? You can see in the three bills before you today, it's defined almost identically. But in Senator Maye Quade's bill in Commerce, AI is defined as the meaning given in United States Code, Title 15, Section 9401. While in other bills, like Senate File 4575, 4573, and 4509, it is not defined the same. These definitional inconsistencies are an example of the need for a more thoughtful approach to regulating an entirely new technology and its potentially far-reaching impacts on our lives and how business is conducted in our state. To be clear, the Chamber's position is that AI should be addressed at the federal level to avoid a contradictory patchwork of different state rules. Just last week, the White House announced a framework for Congress to consider developing AI policies, which will hopefully move the needle for that federal framework to materialize before states get too far out of line. Before Minnesota proceeds down the path of state-level regulation, agreement on a definition of the term across the enterprise of state government seems like a good first step. For another example, in the Senate Commerce Committee, the focus on AI has been pricing of consumer goods. In those committee, Senator Maye Quade seeks to regulate the use of an automated decision system like the bills before you today. While you can read how the bills before you define an ADS here, in the bill before Senate Commerce, an ADS does not have the same technical definition. We doubt that a small business operating in our state would be able to identify how the AI tools they use today would be prohibited, allowed, or even regulated under any of these proposals. Other companies with more sophisticated or complex applications of AI may also be challenged to know what is or is not allowed under these proposals. The definition is broad enough to encompass routine behavioral and transactional information used in business analytics that shouldn't be considered AI or might even predate it. Across retail, hospitality, logistics, manufacturing, and technology sectors, employers rely on automated tools to manage inventory, prevent fraud, administer loyalty programs, respond to demand, and structure compensation systems. These are foundational components of modern commerce. It will be challenging for employers to determine what types of data inputs or operational factors qualify under these new standards. And what if all of these bills happened to pass this session? How would a reasonable person be able to comply with multiple different definitions of what AI is or is not? When key terms vary from bill to bill, compliance becomes a moving target. With heightened disclosure and procedural obligations, regulatory uncertainty increases legal exposure, slows innovation, and discourages investment. To the bills before us, as drafted, some of the requirements are unprecedented, could limit the effectiveness of tools already used in situations for legitimate purposes or unintentionally be included in the scope, will be difficult to operationalize across a workforce or multiple locations, and all, of course, with penalties, and more penalties that will certainly create exposure for technical or inadvertent violations. The Minnesota Chamber continues surveying our members to get a better sense of how they are using AI and related tools and how these bills would interfere, augment, support, or challenge their operations. And it's not clear to us if it is 8 out of 10 employers at this point in time. We believe a more thorough approach is needed before policymakers establish a regulatory framework that is specific to Minnesota, particularly given the need for a federal framework and a comprehensive understanding of AI's uses and benefits for our economy. For these reasons, we oppose moving these bills at this time and look forward to working with this committee as this process develops. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you for your testimony. Next, we have Dalton Danielson. Welcome to the Senate Labor Committee. If you'd please introduce yourself for the record and proceed with your testimony.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dalton Danielson, Fiscal Policy Director with the Minnesota Business Partnership. I stand today in opposition to the bills before you, but let me start with a point of agreement. Technological change is real, and workforce transitions deserve thoughtful, meaningful policy discussions. Employers across Minnesota are already investing heavily in training, reskilling, and responsible deployment of new technologies. However, the bills before you today take a concerning and potentially very damaging approach. In practice, these bills create rigid, punitive requirements that do not reflect how businesses actually operate in competitive, fast-moving markets. Technology adoption is often incremental, experimental, and responsive to global competition. These bills will discourage innovation and slow productivity growth, potentially harming not only Minnesota's employers, but Minnesota's workforce as well, limiting their opportunities for future new opportunities, new job fields, whatever it may be. Additionally, the penalties in this bill are also significant. For example, in Senate File 4576, employers could face back pay, civil fines, and loss of eligibility for state grants, loans, and tax incentives for 5 years. For some employers, this could mean thousands, tens of thousands, or even millions of dollars. That is not a targeted remedy. That is an overcorrection that risks pushing investment, expansion, and job creation out of Minnesota altogether. Furthermore, the penalties become more concerning given the lack of standard definitions, as the Chamber mentioned. Without standard definitions, employers will be operating in constant ambiguity, concerned that any move they make could jeopardize their entire business model. Given the low threshold for what's defined as a covered employer, we are talking about a lot of businesses here in Minnesota. More broadly, and to conclude, we urge the legislature to proceed with great caution before unnecessarily restricting artificial intelligence. AI is a general-purpose technology that is already improving productivity, safety, and job quality across industries. Premature or overly prescriptive regulation risks freezing innovation before we fully understand where the technology will ultimately land. And this could place Minnesota employers and employees at a competitive disadvantage relative to other states. For these reasons, we respectfully urge the committee to oppose these bills and continue conversations with stakeholders. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your testimony. And next we have Melissa Heising, the Legislative Director with the Minnesota AFL-CIO. Please introduce yourself and proceed with your testimony.
Thank you, and good afternoon, Madam Chair and members. My name is Melissa Heising, and I am Legislative Director of the Minnesota AFL-CIO. I'm here to testify in support of Senate Files 4689, 4686, and 4576 as an important step towards common sense regulation of how AI is used in the workplace and its impact on workers. Working people are the experts on how to do their jobs well and safely, and they must have a voice in how AI is deployed in the workplace. On Senate File 4689, we appreciate the strong foundation this proposal establishes to regulate automated decision systems in the workplace. It includes critical protections, advance notice to workers, limits on algorithmic wages, strong appeal rights, and clear prohibitions on using these systems to violate labor rights, civil rights, or safety laws. Those are important steps. But to ensure these systems are truly accountable, several improvements could be made. First, the bills could require impact assessments, not just disclosure, to evaluate accuracy, bias, disparate impacts, and risks to worker rights before systems are deployed, including independent third-party review, regular updates, and a stop use requirement if discriminatory outcomes are found. The bill could also include and should also include anti-retaliation protections for workers who raise concerns or refuse to follow the output of an automated decision-making system when the worker believes in good faith that the output would cause harm, discrimination, or otherwise violate law or professional licensing requirements. On Senate File 4686, the surveillance bill, workers need clear protections to ensure monitoring does not undermine their privacy, their dignity, and their rights on the job. This bill contains important safeguards, including advance notice before monitoring tools are deployed, ensures workers can access their data and appeal employment decisions influenced by monitoring, and places meaningful limits on surveillance, such as banning monitoring in private spaces, prohibiting off-duty surveillance, and restricting technologies like facial or emotion recognition, except for narrow security purposes. Those are important protections. However, similar to the first bill, we think it could go further to ensure monitoring tools are used responsibly by requiring impact assessments to evaluate privacy risks and potential harms, again, before the systems are implemented. On Senate File 4576, this bill recognizes that AI and automation are already transforming workplaces, and workers deserve fairness, transparency, and time to adapt when technology displaces their jobs. We believe this bill could be strengthened to ensure workers are truly protected by extending the timeline, doubling the notice and transitional employment period from 90 days to 180 days, so workers have real time to prepare. The thresholds could also be broadened so more workers are covered, including part-time workers, and so smaller layoffs triggered by automation would still require notice. Second, we should ensure the transition actually leads to quality jobs. Training programs should be worker-centered and connected to proven pathways such as joint labor management training partnerships and registered apprenticeships. And finally, enforcement provisions could be strengthened, including stronger penalties, a private right of action, and anti-retaliation protections. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Why don't we go ahead then and begin with the first bill on our list, which is Senate File 4576. Senator Maye Quade, I think you have an amendment for that bill. Would you like to address that first?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment is the A1. This goes through and kind of updates what we were looking for. So it updates the reduction in equivalent hours from 25% to 10%, and for the whole department or department equivalent. We instruct the commissioner to develop templates for covered employees to provide notice of technological displacement. It also updates the transitional employment period that they're exempt if they have, or if they're transitioned to a position with same or similar benefits or better benefits, right? If we're eliminating an entire department, but we're gonna move everybody in that department to just a different place in the company, and we're gonna train you to be part of that, then they're exempt from that. We are adding in on page 3 after line 6 that the commissioner must consider the size of the employer and the severity of the violation when assessing penalties. And then there is a report that is added to the chairs and ranking minority members of labor. And then it adds an effective date.
Thank you, Senator Maye Quade. And just so you know, we have that amendment that you just walked us through as the A2. And my understanding is that there was an A1, and this is exactly the same, except the A2 directs penalties to the Workforce Development Fund. Is that
Yes, Madam Chair.
what you would like
yes, that is
to
correct.
do?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so on the A2 amendment, this is the author's amendment, okay. Yeah, move, Senator Umer Verbetten offers the A2, the adoption of the A2 amendment. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Right, the amendment is adopted. Is there any other thoughts that you'd like us to start off with in our discussion of Senate File 4576 as amended?
Madam Chair, I think this maybe probably is the most simple bill, I think, of the three. And I do just want to name that I think that a lot of the job loss we might see or job displacement from AI will also be people who will never go into the job market. I know that for recent graduates or people who are transitioning, it's very, very tough to get into entry-level positions. And so I think, you know, there's a body of work to maybe be done around that, but I think this is a really good step because we are seeing job displacement due to AI, and while we've seen job displacement in the economy before due to advancements in technology, this is much broader in scope, and so I'm really glad that we're taking a look at this now and able to move forward.
Very good. Thank you, Senator Maye Quade. Members, discussion on the bill. Yes, Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I guess first I'd like to know the committees this has to go to yet and kind of the path of where we're looking for.
Thank you. I'm glad you raised that issue, Senator Dornick. I believe earlier in our discussion I had mentioned judiciary perhaps, but now in my notes I see that we would plan to send these bills to the State and Local Government Committee, and I don't know if if they have to visit other committees after that. Do you want to speak to that, Senator Maye Quade?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe, well, there is Attorney General enforcement, I believe, in all three of these. I'm not 100% sure if that automatically sends it to judiciary. Invoking Attorney General enforcement doesn't always do that. And I think 831 is the jurisdiction of this committee, correct? So anyway, I don't know if this one needs to go to judiciary automatically, but the other two I believe would.
Okay. Senator Dornick, does that answer your question?
Yes, it
They'd
did.
have to go state government. We think judiciary, then finance.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To Senator Maye Quade, thank you for bringing this. It's a very important issue, so I appreciate that. Why the intentions for both of us would be to protect workers. I'm just concerned with the amount of regulations and the speed of this bill with all the stuff that's in it, and we're just running out of time. I guess my first question would be, as far as the work that you put into this so far, the stakeholders, have you worked with the businesses, with DLI, and just kind of how did you put this together, and then maybe use some other states to model after?
Senator Maye Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Dornick. I am very happy to give a lot of the credit to my author in the other body who spent the whole interim working with states and stakeholders and national partners. I think what you're looking at in Senate File 4576 is a combination of two states, New Jersey and New York, who have some of these provisions. So I have been learning along the way with my counterpart in the other body, but this has been a lot of his work is what you're seeing before you.
Senator Dornick.
Madam Chair, thank you. Second question would be, now the federal have a, called the WARN Act, that they have some parameters for this, which is 100 employees or less and 60 days. So how would this bill interact with that one? And does that not cover some of the things that you're concerned with?
Senator Maye Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I believe, Senator Dornick, the WARN Act is about layoffs. Am I correct?
Yes.
Thank you. You know, I think there's two parts to that. The first is that, you know, this isn't just the number of people, it's the percentage of the workforce within a company that could be displaced, and it's within a 12-month period. And that recognizes that often layoffs are budgetary decisions or merger decisions that happen kind of in chunks or all at once. And job displacement from AI could happen to an entire, you know, fiscal department, but no others. And so looking at that percentage is actually really important, because you could have whole swaths of the workforce that are, you know, at risk of displacement, but when you look at their entire company, it's a really small number or a really small percentage, but that department could be gone. And we want to make sure that we have our attention on that.
Senator
Thank you, Madam
Dornick.
Chair. Thank you, Senator McQuaid. So it's 50 or, let's see, 50 or more, is that your intent? And then how many businesses would that affect in Minnesota? Would you know that? And then I've heard just from a couple testifiers that are representing business that are very concerned about this. So other than, I think it's Representative Greenman, is that who's been, no? With the House, I'm just wondering how much, you had mentioned there was some business interaction, but again, both testifiers were very concerned about this.
Senator Maye Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Dornick. For a covered employer, it's 50 or more full-time employees. I don't have the number off the top of my head of how many that affects, but it's many. And it's Representative Gottfried in the House who's been working on it. And I think it's important to know for this bill, the job displacement bill, this really is about both giving notice to people who are going to be displaced, having a transitional employment period, and then there's incentive to transition those folks to other places within that business if possible. And so, you know, I'm not really sure how much that would affect businesses in Minnesota beyond saying, hey, if you're going to lay a bunch of people off in a certain part of your business, we would like to know that, and we'd like to know people being displaced.
Senator Dornick. Okay. Senator Umer Verbatim.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator McQuaid, for the bill. I would agree that if folks are going to be displaced, the least we can do is make sure they're given notice in that transitional period. But I was just curious where the timelines came from. I think a minimum of 90 days is good in terms of notice. And then I see that additionally for the transitional employment period. Do we see similar notice periods in any like other area of law? Is that notice that employees have like bargained for in contracts in the past? Just curious if it's where that kind of timing comes from, and if we see similar language anywhere else.
Senator Maye Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Senator Umer Verbatim, for the question. I believe this is modeled after, and I would look to, no, I wouldn't. I believe it is modeled after a time parameter that does exist somewhere else in law. If it's not somewhere else in law, then it is modeled after 2 other states who have this notice period in law, or both.
Great. Any follow-up, Senator? Okay. Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And no specific question, but I'm just going to make a statement or comment about, and this can be about all 3, I won't say it 3 times. But I think the concern I have is that, you know, statement made by Ms. Heising, you know, that employees need to be a part of the process when these things are going to happen. But when I listen to the testimony, I don't believe business has been involved in being a part of the legislation that's going to be telling them what they must or must not do. So I think it is incredibly important that if we're going to move forward on legislation that is going to dictate how businesses operate, and if we're going to abide by the premise that employees need to be a part of the process of things that are going to impact them, then we must also follow that same premise if something's going to impact employers. And from the testimony I heard today, I just do not believe they have been engaged enough in this process. So I hope the intention is that we are not expecting to move this into law this year, that we are going to be, I mean, I really appreciate the conversation because I do share a number of concerns about AI in general. But this isn't something that we should be acting on just kind of a knee-jerk reaction. It's something that's going to take some time to engage with a number of people, get all the perspectives, and be willing to take those perspectives into account in the legislation that we're going to end up with as our end product. So I hope our process is, we're beginning a conversation that we know is going to take some time, more than 2 months that we have left in this legislative session. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator Rarick. Senator Maye Quade, would you like to respond?
Sure, and thank you, Senator Rarick. I really appreciate that feedback. I'll say two things. One, the longer that we wait to put something into law, the more the argument becomes, well, we've been doing this for so long, we couldn't possibly roll it back. It's going to be so detrimental. And my goal would really be to get as, I guess we are behind, let's be very candid about that. But we're not so far behind that companies are looking at, gosh, how did we do things 10 years ago? And you know, go back to the beginning, or how do we give notice, post notice of deploying an automated decision system after we've been using it for 5 years? We would actually be a little bit ahead of most companies deploying something like an automated decision system. And I do want to be really clear that there's nothing about work today that requires you to replace a human with a machine making decisions. So a human at the helm of all of this just exempts you from having to do anything. And I'll point you to the definition of automated decision system. It's meant to partially or fully replace human discretionary decision making. And so that could be things like who's getting a raise, who's getting fired, who's getting laid off, and just requiring people to give notice beforehand, telling them how they're gonna store your data, that they not surveil you when you're not at work or doing work functions or when you're in private places, that they're not implanting things in your body or requiring you to wear things in your personal clothing. And so, you know, I look at a lot of this as really common sense stuff. It's really not meant to get into like which, you know, system you can or can't use. It's just what you can or can't use it for. And I will be honest and say some of the testimony made me really nervous, because when you have a bill that's like, you can't collect, you know, biometric information and try to infer somebody's religious or political beliefs, or you can't, like, you know, scan their face to determine their emotional, mental well-being based on their facial expressions or the tone of their voice. Like, I don't think anybody would want somebody running their constant voice through a thing to say, here's what we think the mental status of your employee is, and here's what we think they'll do based on, you know, what we're inferring from how they walk. So I do think that a lot of this is common sense. We heard a lot of kind of like vague, like stifling innovation or being really hard, but I didn't hear specific, like, here's an example of a thing we wouldn't be able to do that we are doing now that we can all agree is okay. And I would really strongly suggest looking through these bills to find what parts of this bill are identifying what we should consider acceptable behavior that we should take out, because I'm totally open to that. But we did go through it, I will tell you. We spent hours going through it and saying, you know what, actually, that's fine. And this is not. So I appreciate that feedback, and I want you to know that I hear you. And this is really meant to keep it to what's appropriate for employers to be monitoring their employees or data collecting about their employees, and what's not is pretty much what's contained in these bills.
Thank you, Senator. Members, any further discussion on Senate File 4576 as amended? And I'll just take the opportunity before we move this bill, Senator, that I I also appreciate your comment, Senator Rarick, and I appreciate the collaborative nature with which you've approached this work in general. My fears actually are probably on the other end. I share some of the concerns that were voiced by the Minnesota AFL-CIO. I'd like to see some of these, what I feel are just very basic standards in how people should be treated, just strengthened up a little bit. So I have this fear that, 10 years down the road, we're going to be looking back at this time of us being in this legislature and just realize how we had an opportunity in this time period, right now, this session, maybe next session, but things are moving so quickly, so much faster than we are used to moving at the legislature, that I'm more worried that we are already behind, but I'm worried that we're going to fall further and further behind this technology and that people are going to suffer as a result. So I think it's imperative that we get moving. Not seeing any further comments. Would someone like to move that Senate File 4576 as amended be recommended to pass and re-referred to the Committee on State and Local Government?
So moved.
Okay. Thank you. On that motion, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The motion passes. All right, next we're moving to Senate File 4686. And I believe there's an amendment on this as well. Senator Maye Quade?
Yes. I can walk through the amendment, Madam Chair.
We also have this listed as an A2.
Great.
Yeah. Would you like to just give us a quick?
Will you tell me what the difference between the A1 and the A2?
Yep.
Madam Chair, members, Senator Maye Quade, the difference is the same for all three. It was the having the penalties go to the Workforce Development Fund.
Thank you. Madam Chair, for the A2 amendment for Senate File 4686, one thing that I do want to point out is on line 1.17, we've taken out the word assist on the definition of automated decision system so that it is used, currently says to assist or replace human discretionary decision-making. That is used, and we're changing it to use to partially or fully replace human discretionary decision-making. That is a really important point. I think assist might be a little too vague or too low. So fully or partially replacing human decision-making system. Then you'll see some just updated tightening of language. So instead of on page 8, line 12, workers who are off duty, we said outside of regularly scheduled work hours. We tighten up. A lot of this is tightening up language or making sure there's really clear definitions or really clear words. And then we are directing the penalty to go to the Workforce Development Fund instead of the individual. That's the amendment. Happy to talk any more about the specifics of the bill.
Very good. Why don't we go ahead and move the adoption of the A2? I'll go ahead and make that motion. All in favor of adopting the A2 amendment, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the A2 is adopted. Is there anything else you'd like to say in regard to this bill in particular, Senator Maye Quade, before we have discussion on it?
We're on 4686.
4686.
Thank you.
Yeah.
On electronic monitoring. Yes. I actually appreciated Nico, the testifier, giving the experience of working at the Minnesota Department of Revenue. That's our own enterprise, and that I had no idea that level of monitoring and surveillance was going on of our state employees, and with a company to whom I don't know for sure that data isn't going to the entire company of Amazon and being used in other ways that that aren't related to completing the job and being evaluated for the job. So a really, really good example of before that gets deployed to the rest of the enterprise, let alone any other part of our workforce, to make sure that if employees are being electronically monitored, it's for these reasons. It is to ensure quality of goods and services, facilitate compliance with laws and regulations, protect the health, safety, and security of workers or the security of the employer's facilities or computer networks. I think those are great reasons to have electronic monitoring, or at least acceptable reasons to have electronic monitoring. Outside of that, we're veering really far into over-surveillance of our workers, and then using digital tools to do that with no guardrails currently in law around what that data can be used for, sold for, traded for. And in this increasingly digital world, we shouldn't have to give up our privacy in order to have a job. And so this bill, I think, takes really good steps to rein in unacceptable uses of electronic monitoring. And there was a bill that Senator Lucero actually gave me a few days ago about not having an employer implant electronic monitoring inside of a person. And I said, well, boy, will you love my bill on electronic monitoring, because that is also included in here as well. That's line 8.24, physically implant devices that collect or transmit worker data. Or installed in personal items of clothing or accessories. So this is, I mean, it sounds weird when you say it out loud, but there's two members of different caucuses who've introduced bills around this, right? And so this is stuff that is happening or proposed to happen. And we really just want to make sure that workers aren't giving up all of their privacy of their entire life just by going to work because of the electronic monitoring tool that company has chosen to use.
Thank you, Senator Maye Quade. Members, any discussion on this bill as amended? Yes, Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just wondering with the Dolly, if one of their representatives would come up, and I'd like to ask a question or two and then just see how they're doing with the bill.
Thank you. If you'd like to go ahead and proceed with your question, Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. So I guess being the enforcement, I know you guys are really busy with the many different things that we've assigned you to investigate, and we appreciate you and the work you do, so thank you for that. Just with this and the task that you're going to have, I'm just wondering, one, maybe is this going to require more full-time employees, some more finances to help enforce, or just kind of address those first?
Please introduce yourself for the record, and then proceed. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Josiah Moore, Legislative Director at Department of Labor and Industry. Thanks, Senator Dornick. Generally, we are working on a fiscal note for this bill and the other two that are in front of the committee today. So I don't have specifics on the costs, but I can just say generally that whenever DLI is assigned enforcement, new enforcement, we typically project costs and project staff costs associated with that enforcement.
Senator Dornick.
Thank you. So you're saying at this time you don't have it all. Is that what you said?
Please go ahead.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, we don't have specifics, but some general information about what we would generally project.
Okay, so as this bill has been being put together and stuff, how much involvement have you and the department had?
Please go ahead.
Thank you. We have not provided technical assistance on this bill at this time, so we are in the early stages of forming what that technical assistance would be, and we'll work with the authors and any other stakeholders to provide that and get our heads around it more as we have that ready.
Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. No further questions.
Okay. Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Question for the author. Just wondering on this one, I think in today's world, if someone is not performing their duties up to speed, an employer is required to get a lot of documentation in place before they would let someone go for cause. Is there, just starting to go through this, I'm just wondering I'm hoping you'll work with the business groups to ensure that they're still going to have the ability to do that type of tracking so that they would be able to get the documentation they would get to see if someone is not performing their duties, because like I said, in today's world, you have to have everything documented if you are going to let someone go for cause. And my worry is that the language we have in this bill is actually going to undercut that, and now they wouldn't be able to be able to keep those records or collect the information they would need for that. So I don't think, I'm hoping, that's not something we're trying to eliminate. Like I said, I agree with you on a number of the things that especially, implanting something into somebody, things like that. But to make sure that we are still able to track and monitor that someone is actually performing their job, and if not, that they would be able to use that information if they are in need of letting somebody go.
Senator Maye Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator Rarick, for the question. Yes, we have on 7.9, so we have what employers can use electronic monitoring for, so ensuring quality of goods and services, facilitating compliance with laws and regulations, protecting the health, safety, or security. And then if you look over at the electronic monitoring tool definition on 2.4, it just means any system, application, or instrument that facilitates the collection of data by means other than direct supervision by a person. So direct supervision is always available to every employer, always, and documentation of misconduct or failing to meet benchmarks or standards, all of that is always available to employers as well.
Yeah, Paul.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate that, but yet as we have moved into this remote and hybrid world, many people who are working in their homes, you do not have that direct supervision. So you're relying on some of these technologies to monitor, to make sure that they're continuing their workforce, like maybe that, yes, they're actually at their computer working. So I hope we're not taking away some of that ability, because not everyone has that direct supervision happening.
Follow-up, yeah.
Thank you, Madam Chair and Senator Rarick. I think you're talking about something different than what electronic monitoring would accomplish. And so if somebody's not at their computer and they're not doing their job, right, they're maybe not responding to emails or not showing up for meetings or not available when they're supposed to be available, those are always benchmarks that are observable by a person, even if it's not like in that person's home. Like you can see when your colleague isn't responding to the emails or finishing their part of the project or logging into the system to update the whatever, right? All of those benchmarks are available and tell us how people are doing at their job. And none of that requires you to be monitoring keystrokes, right? Because when you're given a job, you have deliverables that you have to give as part of your work. And if you're not meeting those, that's not going to be trackable by how many keystrokes did you enter, or what was your facial expression while you were on the phone with somebody, right? And so the things that you're talking about, always available to employers, and would never want to take away the ability for employers to measure outcomes for employees. What I want to take away is the ability for employers to over-surveil their employees and insert irrelevant things as meaning of how well are you doing at your job, like how does your face look when you're on the phone with somebody, or did you go to the bathroom for 5 minutes, right? Like those are not necessary to talk about somebody accomplishing their job deliverables.
Follow-up, Senator Rarick.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I mean, I appreciate that. I'm not, in my reading through this, I understand I haven't had as much time as I would have liked to fully grasp this. But I think, we've heard before that, oh, don't worry, this isn't covered. I mean, the prime example, we can go back again, this was federal, but Obamacare, oh, you can keep your doctor. Oh, don't worry, this is going to lower rates. And then we'd come to find out that wasn't true. So I think we need to, just because it's the intent that it's in there, that's what we want. The words on the page matter, and dealing with all the folks that are impacted by this and making sure they agree that the language is doing what you're saying is doing is important. And if we have the groups that represent businesses that come forward and say, we don't agree, I hope we're listening and trying to make changes so that it addresses what we say it's addressing and not actually having other impacts that were unintended.
Any further discussion or questions for our author? Seeing none, I think that the bill is great. I anticipate there probably will be some changes as it moves through, and again, parallel to the last situation, my worry is that these definitions of what employers are able to use this for, so much surveillance can be couched in those subcategories, that I do worry that an employer could always say, well, this was related to the job performance. This was related to these things that are okay for them to surveil employees with. So from the other perspective, I would look for some tightening up there as well in that regard. But with that, members, Senator Uma Verbaeten would move that Senate File 4686, as amended, be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Committee on State and Local Government. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? No. The motion passes. Members, on now to the last bill, Senate File 4689. And likewise with the 4689, we have an A2 amendment.
Yes, Madam Chair. So this on 4689 on that line 1.17, you're seeing that same replacement of assist to partially or fully replace human discretionary decision-making. One place I guess I really want to note, because it's a big and I think important change, on line 1.7 of the amendment, so page 9, lines 11 and 12 in the bill, we're essentially saying that an automated decision system cannot terminate a worker. That actually has to be the decision of a human being. And electronic monitoring can collect the things to present to a human, you know, I'm going to recommend this person for termination, or here's all the stuff that might lead you to that conclusion, but the ultimate decision to terminate a worker does have to be a human being. This also puts the funds from the violations in the Workforce Development Fund. Also adds in the language about the commissioner considering the size of the employer and the severity of the violation when assessing penalties, and then puts in an effective date of January 1, 2027.
Members, any questions about this amendment? This is an author's amendment to get the bill in the shape that Senator Maye Quade would like it to be in. So I will go ahead and offer the adoption of the A2 amendment. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right, the A2 amendment is adopted. Any thoughts you'd like to lead us off with, Senator Maye Quade?
Sure. So this bill is about automated decision systems, and to be very candid about what automated decision systems are, it's when a system is taking in information and then making decisions without a human on behalf of that system, I should say, based on the inputs that it's getting. To be very clear, automated decision systems aren't email filters, firewalls, antivirus software, identity and access management tools, calculators, databases, data sets, or any other compilation of data. When it comes to automated decision systems, the bill requires pre-use notice, so the employer has to let employees know that this is going to happen. What sets of decisions are the automated decision system allowed to make, and what inputs are going to be put in to make those decisions, and allow employees to read that in a very easy, digestible way, and not like, you know, our terms of service when you log into social media. And then it lays out what needs to be contained in the pre-use notice. It sets out requirements for record keeping, record requests, and it's really important because if employees, if there's a decision that is made and an employee is affected by that, like let's say they're, you know, placed on a PIP because of an automated decision system, but it's for something that that person never did or said, or maybe they weren't even there at work that day, because AI is notorious for hallucinating, the right to access their own information and then request human review of the decision. There's post-use notice requirements as well. Standalone communication, easy to understand. I think I already talked about right to access, right to appeal. And then of course there's the enforcement and anti-retaliation language as well. That is the automated decision system. I do want members to just think about the difference between an automated decision system and maybe the way we would use AI or algorithms. So imagine that when we introduce bills, instead of going to a person and a person saying this is what committee it goes to, an algorithm read our bills and just decided what committee it went to. We would want the right to say, actually, that was a mistake. Why did it think that? I understand, and fix that mistake. That's what this bill essentially does, is it makes sure that there can be human reviewers for any decisions made, and that the decisions made are limited to workplace issues and not of great consequence, like firing you without a human determining that, or taking in information that is not necessary to the job, like your disability status, your health status, your religious or political beliefs, in order to make any other determinations about you or your employment.
Thank you, Senator. Members, comments, questions? Yes, Senator Dornick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Senator Maye Quade. Again, we agree there's some things that need to be done, so thank you for coming here. I was wondering if I could bring up Lauren Schothorst to ask a few questions. Would that be okay?
Yes.
If she's okay to come up.
Please proceed.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony, and it's a lot for us to try to digest, and there's a lot with the 3 bills and stuff. I was wondering if you could help us with maybe some examples, how it would affect, and some of the things that maybe you're concerned with in the bill, if you would do that.
Please proceed.
Sure, Madam Chair, Senator Dornick, Lauren Schothorst with the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce. You know, in looking through a variety of the bills, as defined, the scope could include a number of technologies like geolocation tools, video surveillance, time tracking software, photo optical systems that are far more than high risk, AI monitoring, a restaurant using a basic shift scheduling app, or a trucking company using GPS fleet tracking for payroll purposes would both be covered in full. I'm looking through some of the examples. A small trucking company using fleet tracking technology to log delivery routes have the same notice, consent, and data access infrastructure as a large employer would be covered using AI-driven performance monitoring. Those are not the same things, but they would be treated the same under the bill.
Madam Chair.
Senator Maye Quade, if you'd like to respond, and then also we can give you another chance also to reply, and I'm sure that Senator Dornick will want to weigh in as well. Yes, Senator Maye Quade.
It's just a technical correction. The affirmative consent piece was deleted in the A2 amendment, so I just want us to be clear as we move forward.
Thank you.
When we're looking at scheduling software, task routing tools, customer queue systems, basic performance dashboards, could be covered. Exclusions do not protect the broad middle ground of common enterprise software that uses statistical modeling or optimization logic to surface recommendations to managers. So a workforce scheduling platform that uses demand forecasting to suggest shift assignments is not a database or a calculator. It's a computational process issuing simplified output used to assist in an employment-related decision could fall squarely within the definitions under the bills. So the point being is these are broad, sweeping definitions, and without a clear understanding as to what is being utilized already that might not be fully contemplated in the bill could be covered. And, you know, in looking at the future of this piece of legislation or these multiple pieces of legislation, trying to see what level of specificity might be necessary or to confirm whether or not these things should be covered at all. And the drafting today, I don't think hits that balance.
Thank you for that. Senator Maye Quade, would you like to respond quick before I turn it back over to Senator Dornick?
Sure, 2 parts. If you look at lines 1.20 and 1.21, it does talk about what's not an automated decision system. Compilation of data is one of them. So if you're looking at, you know, about how many people did we have 4th of July weekend come through the store to guess how many shifts we need, that's a compilation of data. That's not an automated decision system. And to be really clear, this doesn't prohibit automated decision systems. So a small trucking company in electronic monitoring that uses tracking for its fleets, they just have to notify their drivers that they are tracking that, tell them what they're tracking and what they're then using it for. That's, I don't think, a huge burden, and I think workers have a right to know when they're being tracked, whether it's driving a truck or working in a store or sitting at a computer and working for the Department of Revenue.
Senator Dornick.
Thank you, appreciate that. So I guess last question, does this affect Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, and how does that interact with them at all?
Is the question for
Senator Maye Quade.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Are you, Senator Dornick, are you talking about automated decision-making or for?
Yeah, well, with their interaction. With their platform and their phone and yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. So automated decision systems would be impacted, but they would just be required to notify them what kind of system they're using, what they're using it for, what data they're putting into it, and that's fine. Does that make sense? Yeah.
Senator Dornick?
That's it, unless Ms. Schotthorst wanted to respond to.
Ms. Schotthorst, do you have any last thoughts you wanted to share with us in line with what we were talking about?
I would just say we would disagree about the burden that this would place. It's incredibly burdensome, confusing definitions, applications beyond what might be intended in the scope of this bill.
Thank you. Yes, Senator Rarick.
Thank you. I was actually just going to say the same thing, and that this, Senator Maye Quade, when you said you don't think it's burdensome, have you checked with NFIB? Have you checked with any of these other groups to see if they believe it's burdensome or not? I mean, I think that's part of the problem we have here. Too many times we as legislators think we know the answer to something, and we haven't checked with those who we're putting this on to see if they agree that it's burdensome or not. And I also think, again, with many of these last two especially, when we're talking about the penalties that are involved, I think we should be working with those groups to see just what kind of a impact. I mean, that might be we think that fine could be proper for in a very large business, but that could be crippling to a small business that makes a mistake in their notification or something. So I think those are things we all have to really think about as this moves forward. But I do have one just technical question, I think, for our staff to help me understand. These last two bills, the definitions are, if not virtually the same, very, very similar, but we're putting them into two different spots of statute. And is there a reason we're doing that rather than just creating the same spot for this in reference to the bill instead of having it, if they all pass, having it in multiple places?
Ms. Doyle-Fontaine.
Madam Chair, members, and Senator Rarick, that is something we discussed with the author, just, if you pass one or not the other. But I think eventually we'll probably have some uniform definitions in a single section for all of these AI terms as with regard to employment. So I think that was just the way it was drafted because they were two separate bills. But yes, we would keep track of that and not want them to conflict, et cetera. So we've got that in mind.
Follow-up, Senator Rarick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that because I think that would be very beneficial to consolidate the definitions all into one place and just make cross-references. So as was brought up in testimony before, we're avoiding that conflict of definitions, that potential. So thank you.
Yes, follow-up.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to be clear about two things. So one, the prohibitions in the automated decision-making system just says an employer can't use an automated decision system to prevent compliance with or cause a violation of the law, state, federal, local, obtain private information about a worker, including their veteran status, their religious or political beliefs, their psychological state, their sexual or gender orientation, disability, credit history, reproductive health or status or plan, to predict or take adverse action against a worker for exercising the worker's legal rights, to predict a worker for exercising their worker's legal rights, make predictions or inferences about a worker's behaviors, beliefs, intentions, personality, emotional state, health, or other characteristics or behavior that are unrelated to the worker's essential job functions, and to collect data that they don't need, including drawing on their face, gait, or emotional recognition technologies. I don't care, honestly, if we are burdening companies with not doing that. What they are allowed to do under this bill is have data that is directly related to the ability of the worker to complete the task. Education, training, experience, seniority. They can have inputs that are clearly communicated to the worker so that they know that their compensation is a function of whatever they're, making decisions with that input. These are not like wild things, and I think like letting your workers know that you're surveilling them or monitoring them and that you're using a system to make decisions about their work I think is just bare bones basic what we should be doing in this economy. And all of the things I mentioned that they're like employers are not allowed to do, I think we should all be very concerned if we are hearing that it is burdensome to not do those things. And I really want to be clear that I believe the reason that this law is so needed is because the tech companies who make this software and make these tools have terrible to little to no regulation. And so they can do a lot of really good things and then also do a lot of really terrible data collection and data surveillance. And the companies can't get the tool without the bad things. They can't get the good thing without the bad thing. And so this really is about putting regulations on the types of tools that can be deployed in this state. It's not saying that employers want that information. I don't think Minnesota employers want that information. I don't think they want to use it, and I don't think they want to collect it, partially because it would be a violation of the law in many cases. But I think the tech companies who design these tools and then tell companies how great, and they're not wrong, right? Some of these efficiencies and the sorting, all of that is great. And then ancillary to that is all of this terrible stuff. And so what I really see this bill as doing is saying, no, not to the employers, but to the tech companies who are designing these tools. If Minnesota employers can't be allowed to collect all this data and do all this stuff, then tech companies are gonna have to design their tools differently so that they're not doing the things that are clearly harmful and clearly surveillance into places that aren't necessary and needed for work. And so I don't think this is necessarily burdensome in the way that it might be talked about. I do think that the tools are doing that, and I don't think Minnesota employers would say, I love it, but it's part of the package, and we need to make it not part of the package.
Thank you for that. Follow-up or other comments, questions? Yes, Senator Rick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So to that point, I guess that spurred the question that if you're pointing this towards the tech companies, and this is something we're doing at the state level rather than the federal level, do you think there's enough companies in Minnesota that the tech companies are going to worry about changing their software and providing for them what they would need, or are they just going to say, well, we'll just keep selling our stuff, and Minnesota companies, you're just going to have to keep doing it longhand now. You're not going to, we're not going to go through the hassle of redeveloping our software just to meet your state law?
Senator Maye Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senator Rick, it's a really good question. I'm glad you asked it. Part of the answer to that question is there are state legislators from across the country who are working across party lines. So I work with Republicans and independents in other states and Democrats in other states on legislation that attempts to get our hands around the way that consumer-facing tech and AI has been rolled out in society with no regulation. And so the hope is that we can pass enough state laws where there's a critical mass where there's a lot of Fortune 500 companies headquartered in the state of Minnesota, right? And so it's not just companies who are in Minnesota, but we got headquarters here too. And if that's going to be the state of play, then that's going to be the state of play for all, Best Buys or all 3Ms or all Targets. The second part I will say is tech is finally having their reckoning. In the last 2 days alone, social media companies have been found liable for addictive and harmful behavior and owe money to those victims. And so I think we're finally in a place, and I think the bipartisan work in state legislatures across the country is evidence of the fact that we can no longer let big tech go unregulated in this way. And in particular, this surveillance of our life has been sold to us as you need this thing because it's going to be so helpful, it's going to be so great for you. And also we get all this data about you and we get to do all of these things to you, and we really have to break that apart. And again, I don't think Minnesota companies are the ones who are saying, oh, I would love to know the psychological state of my employees and what they might do in a week. But buying technology that allows them to shift schedule efficiently also gives them that information, and that just shouldn't be.
Thank you. Follow-up, Senator Rick.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So one last follow-up then. And I don't know what your other bills are, but if this is, like this one specifically is meant to kind of go after the technology companies, why isn't it being written to them and their products rather than to the businesses and putting the penalties on the businesses? Why aren't we going after the tech companies with this legislation?
Senator Maye Quade.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and Senator Rarick. As we were having this conversation, I was like, I'd be really happy to write a bill regulating, not just ADS in employment, but like how ADS systems are designed and sold to companies in the state of Minnesota. And I think there is some work happening on like what are the ingredients that are included in some of these electronic monitoring systems and automated decision systems as well, so that, I think a lot of companies probably don't even get the full scope of the information when they're said, here's this like efficiency product. And so it's a really good idea. And I think it's worth doing. The issue before us, though, is that, as we heard from our testifier at the Department of Revenue, it's already happening. And so we do need regulations in place for these systems as they've already been deployed. But I do think you're right that there maybe is a bigger bill to be done about these systems and how they're designed and how they're unleashed in the public.
You follow up?
Yeah, thank you. So no more questions, but just, one follow-up to that. And it's as you just stated, you think a lot of the companies, they're getting these technologies from a company, and they probably don't even know, 2/3 of what's in it. And then my worry is that company's gonna get this piece of software, whatever it is, and then they're going to be on the hook for the fines rather than the tech companies. Even though they didn't even know it was there, they weren't using it. Somebody's gonna find out it's there, it's in the cloud or wherever the heck it is, and it's the company that's gonna be punished rather than the tech company that, so I hope we can keep considering those things as this moves forward.
Thank you, Senator Rarick.
Madam Chair.
Yes, follow.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I really appreciate that. One of the things we were just talking about, I don't even know what date it is, sometime this week, was potentially requiring disclosure to companies at the point of sale for or contract for an electronic monitoring system or automated decision system of everything that it includes, so that companies have the information before them of the full scope of what is possible, so they can make those decisions with that full information, that companies are required to disclose that. And so you are on the right track, and I'll probably bring you that amendment before it comes onto the bill.
Nice, thanks. Well, members, this has been a great discussion today and really excellent testifiers. I really, really appreciated all of the sort of really good questions and good knowledge shared with us in the back and forth. I think that's really a lot of what we need right now. So on this final bill, do I have a motion to recommend that Senate File 4689 as amended be recommended to pass and be re-referred to the Committee on State and Local Government?
So moved, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much for the motion. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? The motion passes. Thank you, everyone, very much for a very interesting hearing today. The discussion will continue. And with that, the Senate Labor Committee is adjourned.